Hello, this is Rich Larson from Watermark Learning. Welcome to the February 2018 edition of the IIBA certification chats. You see a slideshow scrolling. You're going to get a copy of these by downloading them from the GoToWebinar toolbar and use them for reference. There's a couple of things here with some links on them, as well as some tips. I put together here for my top 10 list of study tips for you to look at and review, and feel free to ask about any of them as we go. I see some of you have written in and told me your name, where you're located, and practice using the GoToWebinar panel. I see a couple questions come in right now. I'm going to read them one at a time as they come in, and feel free at any point, if I haven't answered your question in enough detail or didn't answer it the right way, but send a follow-up question. I know it's kind of a little bit tougher with the written format, but we make it work. And I think it's a good venue. Then you won't worry about how you sound on the audio or if your accent, whatever. Not going to matter. So first question comes in from Anurag. Hello. For CBAP exam, do I need to remember the list of techniques and stakeholders involved in each and every task? That's the first part of the question. I'll get to the second part in just a second. First of all, I don't think you need to memorize down to that level of detail. There are always some things I suggest you understand and know for sure and commit to memory. Things like, what are the knowledge areas? Very critical, very important. I also think you should, if not memorize them, certainly be familiar with all 30-odd tasks within and have a familiarity with them. You don't necessarily have to memorize the exact name, but you need to know, like prepare for elicitation, conduct elicitation, those kinds of things, and roughly the order as well, because sometimes questions come at you like, you know, given this situation, the BA needs to get some information from stakeholders. What's the first thing the BA needs to do? Well, if you got an easy question like that, it would be prepare for elicitation. So that you have to know somewhat the order, even though the BALPAC is very clear about the order of things not mattering. Sometimes they do. But getting down to the level of memorizing which stakeholders are involved in each and every task, no, I don't think you need to do that, Anurag and everybody else. What I do think you need to know is, you know, what the stakeholders are, roughly, and you don't have to memorize necessarily, is it a tester or a QA analyst? That's going to be up to the test question creator from IIBA, what exact phrase they use. So knowing that that is one of the stakeholders, of course, is more important. So second part of your question is, can I accept the direct questions as in V2 exam? And I'm not quite sure what your question is there as far as accept the direct questions. If you're asking me, do you get, you know, pure knowledge-based questions? The answer is they've really reduced those in the version 3 exam. You're going to get 40 or so % of the questions based on case studies, 30 to 40% on situations and scenarios. In both categories, you'll have anywhere from 2 to 4 or so questions per case study or per scenario. And the rest of them will be more straightforward knowledge-based questions. And that reminds me, I'm going to launch a poll right now, just based on your question about the CBAP exam. Not everybody on the call today is on CBAP, so I'm going to let the poll go and ask you to weigh in. Please indicate what certification you're interested in. Hopefully you can all see the poll. It looks like it's displaying. So let me see here. People are answering. That's great. We've got about 86 of you voting, so I'm going to close the poll. Most of you are CBAP, but a good share of you are ECBA. Good to see. I'm going to share the poll results. Take a peek at that, and you're going to see that 42% CBAP, 17 CCBA, 33% of you are interested in ECBA, and the rest are not sure. So we have lots of information on our website about the qualifications for the different scenario or different certifications. So check out our website for information on that. And the slides also have some information, by the way, based on that. There's a just a ton of information on our website for you to look at for the different certifications to get things like the qualifications, number of hours of experience. So thank you, Anurag, for that great question. All right, number 2, next. I'm going to, first, before I go hide the poll here and get back to, all right, show my screen. All right, here we go with the slides. I guess I wasn't showing it, so you might have been curious, what is he talking about? Okay, next. Let's see, William says, is this a good test question? Well, yes, William, it is. Tina, hello. There'll be a couple of Tinas on the call today. A good way to curb programmers going directly to the client and vice versa. Are you asking my advice, or is it about a certification question? Because I don't think you'd be asked that on certification. I could spend some time talking about curbing programmers going directly to the client, because really that's what a role of a BA could and should be. Now, you have various people who would disagree with that depending on the approach on a different project. And really, in some ways, if there is no firm structure of a BA liaison, having programmers talk to end users can work. The problem I see with that is when programmers act like programmers and not like analysts. I mean, when they're asking programming technical kind of questions of an end user. But anyway, so I want to send a follow-up question to that, Tina, to see what your approach is. Another Tina asks, what would be the best approach for someone with multiple years of experience entering the BA space when studying? I think a couple of approaches, Tina, would work on that. Yeah, first, getting some kind of generic book on business analysis. My colleague Barb Carcanode wrote a good introductory book. I think it's called 7 Steps to Mastering Business Analysis. It's basically a kind of another way to look at the BABOK, the BA body of knowledge, which is a way for new BAs to get started. Another thing that we published is a book called How to Talk BA, which has a lot of terminology, because that's sometimes a battle when you're entering the field, because you don't know what the terms are. We throw around a lot of acronyms, don't we? So that's another thing. A third thing might be the ECBA certificate, and that's what IIBA intends, certainly, to help people get off the ground with their careers and to go through that. We have a class by full acknowledgement here. We have a lot of ECBA materials in a great class to help people. So that's yet a third approach. Hopefully that is just a real quick answer. Again, if you want to ask follow-up questions, let me know. Somebody is asking, and it's John, by the way, is asking, what's the passing score for the ECBA? IIBA does not release those scores. We in the field kind of generally use 70% as the general marker for that. So if you're using our online study exams, which I hope you do because they're great products and they've helped a lot of people, shoot for about 80%. And the reason we recommend that is to be over-prepared and practice and practice and practice until you're hitting that level, and then you will hopefully be then set to go. So John, count on about 70% for the passing rate. Michelle is asking for ECBA, what is the most effective way to prepare to pass the exam? Well, I kind of mentioned a couple of things, Michelle, is get some general familiarity with the BABOK, if you will, from a standpoint of different resources. Now, one of the resources I didn't mention is our BABOK study tables. And while this is not meant as an advertising session for us, you're asking about studying. So I think some way to understand what is in the BA body of knowledge is really necessary, rather than trying to read the whole thing, which you certainly could do. And I would have that as a reference. So you could look it up like a dictionary. You're not going to read it from cover to cover, let's say, for the ECBA, but you may want to dive into it at certain points to kind of read more about a certain technique or a task or something. But I think our study tables are a way to look at it in a more big picture, higher level view, and it's a good study companion for you to get into that. And of course, as a training company, naturally that is our passion, to help people out. So that's another effective way to study. And things like flashcards can help you. Even creating your own flashcards, depending on your learning style, might be another effective technique. And we were just talking this week on our internal team about writing questions, and the idea came up of suggesting students to write their own exam questions, yet another way to help you study so you can understand the information. Tina's asking, it's just things aren't getting into the requirements because I am being bypassed. So you're following up your question about preventing the programmers. Well, one thing you can do is probably talk to the developers to state your concerns, and if there's a project manager or scrum master, you can bring up risks to the project if the programmers are zeroing in on the clients and bypassing you, because while it can work, I've worked in many projects where programmers get an answer to a question that's very narrow and answers a programming if statement, but it doesn't look at the big picture and get at any real requirements or business rules. So, first thing is maybe to confront them and use your conflict management skills if need be, because there could be some conflict with them, and or influencing skills to help overcome some of those issues. So thanks for asking it. It's kind of, I don't get that kind of question in these chats very much, but I'm really happy to try to address those. William is asking, is there a physical location that people could attend an in-class CBAP boot camp? William, great question. We're thinking of adding one. And so what I'd encourage you to do is to send your particulars go to our website, go to the contact screen, and put down your request there. We tend to be a little bit careful about scheduling in-person classes these days, because the world seems to really kind of moved away from a lot of that. When we've tried it in the past, it hasn't always succeeded, and we end up either having just a very few people in a class or having to cancel it. Sometimes it's wildly successful, but see, our virtual classes have been way more better attended, and as a result, we tend to go with what works. So, but I see a need, and we do get people asking about in-person classes. So let us know some preferred locations. So for instance, if we had a class in Chicago, would you attend one, William? So let me throw it back to you and ask you about that, because we'd like to have a central location. We can't go to every city. Let's see, Michelle is saying, are the Watermark practice tests representative of the types of questions on the ECBA test? We are, like all other vendors, still figuring out the kind of level of detail you need to know on the ECBA exam, because IIBA is pretty tight-lipped about that. What we've done is constructed a number of questions in our study exam that are knowledge-based. And an ECBA exam is entirely knowledge-based. You're not going to get those scenarios or case studies that I mentioned before for the CBAP. Now, having said that, then the BA body of knowledge is a huge volume, and with only 50 questions on your exam, you're going to get a smattering of questions from all over the board. There is a blueprint that is available on the on our website. If I back up here, you can take a look at the links we have in your handouts, and go to our appropriate page, and then look for links to various things like, and it may well be in the FAQs, by the way, the frequently asked questions section of our site. You certainly can get a blueprint from the IIBA handbook. So what I'm trying to say there is study in proportion to the percent. So for instance, there's one question that you're going to get from the solution evaluation knowledge area. One question. So how much do you have to study from that knowledge area to answer that one question correct? It's a real challenge, I think. But on the other hand, being even just somewhat familiar with that whole knowledge area, whether it's from using our study tables or actually reading the overview of the knowledge area, you can then have a better chance of answering that question without having to really understand every single task and every single input and output there. So tell me if that's helping, Michelle, and come back to me with more questions to help clarify. Then we hope we can have a more dialogue. Lindsay is saying, your name is Lindsay from St. Paul. BA is not my title, but the skill set is something I incorporate in my career regularly. That's good to know. And I'm new using these skills as well. Given that, how can I know which certification is right for me? Well, first of all, Lindsay, I would ask you, how many approximate hours of business analysis experience have you had? And again, I think what you said about your title is very important, because the IIBA is very clear, and we all in the industry support this. It doesn't matter what your title has been. Have you been doing some of the tasks and activities, some of the techniques that are in the BABOK? So that would tell you that. Now, first of all, CBAP requires 7,500 hours. CCBA requires 3,750 hours of BA experience. And when I say BA, I mean business analysis, not job title again. But the ECBA has no hours requirement. So if you don't think you've got the 3,000 plus hours to strive for the CCBA, then the ECBA would be your best bet. Now, one thing that can help you determine that is we have these handy dandy worksheets, and they are very helpful for, whoops, I'm going to stop that. The slide crawl tends to want to go past. This is the one that you want to check out. We have this CCBA CBAP application worksheet, which is a great tool to help you lay out your project hours, knowledge area by knowledge area, because there are some knowledge area requirements as well, and I don't want to bog you down with too many details unless you have questions. But these worksheets are fantastic to help you get your hours together to see how many total hours you have, but it also knowledge area by knowledge area. So it does a lot of the work for you. You still have to dig out the hours and estimate how many hours per project you put in. So that's some homework for you to do. And feel free to contact us too for more questions. And certainly these chats are available here for you. So William, great. Thanks for confirming Chicago. And I do encourage you to write into our info box so that we can track your interest as far as us scheduling in-person classes. Okay, Michelle, thanks for that feedback. Now, William is also asking for the CBAP. Did you say that we won't need to memorize all of the inputs and outputs? I did say that. I think memorization can help some people. So certain learning styles would do well to zero in on that. I also want to caution you, though, not to go too far. Those of you who are more independent studiers who are good with facts and details like that might want to take that approach. But those of you that are more of a hands-on learning style, let's say, or one that works well with other people, you might need other techniques to help absorb the information. We're talking about absorbing the BA body of knowledge here. And there are multiple approaches to doing that to tap into. So I should ask you, William, just to keep the conversation going here. What kind of learning style do you think you work with best? Is it more of the detailed orientation, or do you work well by interacting with others, either like one-on-one or in a small group like a study group? Some people work the best. Others work best in a class. Maybe by asking that question earlier, that tells me you might work better in a class environment. Or do you tend to like to study of just get to the right skill? Let me apply this information immediately, in which case practice exams might be the best first thing you do. So tell me what you are. And then the reason I'm asking that, folks, is that let's say memorizing tasks and inputs and outputs helps some learning styles. That doesn't mean it's going to help all of them. So don't feel like you need to adapt that. What you need to do is really absorb the BABOK and apply it. And the best way to apply it is using practice questions. And given we're a vendor, we stay in business because we can sell subscriptions to our study exam. We can help you out that way. I want to mention that and tell you why we developed those, because we did a survey back in 2010. We wanted to find out, after having offered CBAP training for a couple, 3 years, we wanted to find out what was the most effective thing that people found helped them to get their CBAP. You know, we wanted to find out, hey, was it our great training class? Haha. Was it our fantastic study guide? Ho ho. No, what people said was that it was practice questions. And we were sort of dumbfounded by that because we didn't have any tool at that time. Anyway, that led us, that survey, using our BA, skill set of surveying, to discover that, hey, we should be offering a practice exam simulator. So the reason I'm even going into that detail is to tell you that it wasn't obvious to us. We learned from that. We applied that by creating this tool that we've been kind of working on it ever since, kind of continuously improving it. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is back to your question, William, is to practice those questions and then get the feedback based on how you're doing, knowledge area by knowledge area, and then use that to go back in, and maybe you do need to go in and zero in on some particular task and do a little bit more memorization. So you can use the tool to help you focus your study where you need to. Maybe you're really acing some other questions, doing really well, and you don't need to do additional study on them. So why spend the time trying to memorize things you kind of already know and are able to answer, sort of right on your own without having the additional mental work needed? But maybe, so let's take financial calculations as one example. There are some formulas that you are shown in the BABOK, and we get asked this a lot, and we don't know the answer because we don't really want or need to know the specific questions on the exam. I mean, that sounds funny. And if, by the way, if any vendor tells you they know exactly what's on the exam, you should go running from them and report them to IIBA, simply because that's unethical and against the precepts of being an endorsed education provider like we are. So we don't want to know exactly what's on the exam. We want to know the topics, and we know that there's some calculation questions. Somebody starts telling us what the calculations are, we say, no, don't tell us exactly. We really can't know that. Anyway, we do know there's some calculations. So I would then spend time knowing that, looking at what are some of the formulas, and they're not always calculations based on financial formulas. Where I'm going with that is that, it sounds like a bit of a ramble. I mean, I'm going on a tangent. Let me pull it back by saying that, yes, you will get some calculations. Maybe it's worth memorizing a formula or two, but not every single one. For instance, don't try to memorize net present value. That's a bear. You're not going to get asked that, I don't think. It'd be really difficult to do it in a test environment. I can't imagine creating a test question for that. So I'm giving you a lot of stuff here. So let me pull it back a little bit by saying, use your best learning style. And let me see here. Let's see, you didn't send it in. Yeah, William, so I'm still waiting for you, but that's okay. That hopefully answered some of your question without giving you too much information, and shoot me back a follow-up. Tina is asking, any plans to support the new CBATL? We don't think there's going to be an exam for that. Tina, you're referring to the BA Thought Leader certification, which is more of a almost, if there's any exam, it'd be an oral. I don't think there's going to be any kind of a formal test you take. So we don't have any plans at this point. We really are still waiting to hear something from IIBA about that. So we're still in the dark, like most of you are. So, all right. Okay, Laura is asking, what would you consider to be the average time frame to study and to be prepared for the CCBA when you're entering the field and have the BA skills? And do you believe that this is essential to study the BABOK in its entirety? Okay, so Let me break that down a little bit. First of all, we did, in that same research I referenced before back in 2010, and we repeated that a few years later, we found on average people studied about 100 hours to pass their exam. Now, most of the respondents were CBAP people, as reflected by the sheer numbers of CBAPs versus CCBAs in the world. So you may not quite need that many number of hours for the CCBA. Maybe it's more like 80 or so. But bear in mind, the exam covers pretty much the entire BABAC. You're going to get a lot of questions based on scenarios that require you to use some clear thinking and whatever. So make sure you do enough of those practice questions and simulations. But that's the number I would use in planning your study time. Now, if you're saying, Laura, are you entering the field? Or you also say you have business analyst skills already. So, and I'm not quite clear if you are applying your BA type skills, but just now formally becoming a BA. So why don't we, why don't you send me a follow-up, okay? William is saying, what will we see on the screen during the virtual class? If you take a virtual class, and I'm just curious if you're signed up for that, William, or you're just considering it. What you'll see in a virtual class will be the slides of our regular course to focus you on them. I know slides are not the most engaging. However, we do a great job, I think, of verbally making the material come alive and using questions from students as engaging techniques. We also have exercises. We have practice questions. We have discussions on those practice questions to make it work. So you're going to see a variety of things on screen. And I think the virtual mode of learning is really ideal for certification, if it's ideal for anything, simply because it really focuses on the material, which is really critical. As opposed to a skills-based class, I used to vastly prefer in-person when I was teaching a skills-based class, but I learned to appreciate and prefer the virtual format when I taught CBAP CBAP classes, period, simply because it was easier to focus everyone on the material at hand, and that's really what it's about. So the class is interactive. You're asking, is it interactive? It's highly interactive. In fact, sometimes more so, simply because of the great equalizer of the internet. Sometimes in a classroom environment, you can have certain people dominate the class, and that can happen in a virtual class as well. Somebody's asking questions all the time, but I think it tends to encourage a wider participation. And I've found, I'm not sure all instructors find this, maybe they do, but you can more easily call on someone, I think, to engage people in a virtual class. So yeah, it's highly interactive. And if you happen to take one of our self-paced anytime learning courses to prepare for CBAP, let me just put a little plug in for those, simply because sometimes you don't always have the time or the availability to do the live classes. Our anytime learning classes are highly interactive as well. Some people found them more engaging than a live class they attended from another vendor. So how's that? We love hearing those kind of quotes from people. But all right, so Laura, you said yes. That's good. Michelle says, do you think you may need that many hours for ECBA? Okay, for ECBA, no, I would not think that. Probably 50. We haven't had enough ECBAs approved by IIBA yet for us to do a survey on them. Love to do one to see how many hours they spent studying. I don't think. I think maybe 50 would be the max. Oh, so Laura, thanks. You're in a legacy environment. Got it. So William is also asking, and before I get into that question, we're at the bottom of the hour, and I'm going to keep going. If you have to leave, bear in mind you can tune into the end of the recording here once it's posted, because I know we always advertise this as a half hour, but I always like to keep going with questions as long as people have them. So if you have to leave right now, uh, that's cool. That's fine. And look for our recording. So William is saying, are the materials sent to the virtual students prior to the class? Yes, they are. You get the same materials as if you attended a class in person. You get an extensive student manual with hundreds of slides in them. You get our CBAP certification study guide, plus other goodies like the study tables I mentioned before, and other training aids that get shipped to you in a box prior to class. So yes, it's really cool that way, because it's really the next best thing to being in person. Okay, Laura saying, are the practice tests broken down in chapter intervals to reinforce skills? Yes, they are. We created our practice exam in what was then a unique way. Now we've been copied by other vendors into, we have warm-up questions, which are kind of like mini simulations to kind of get yourself going with easy questions. Then we have things we call drills. You can pick a different area out of the BABOK, whether it's one of the 6 knowledge areas or techniques, BA competencies, and they call it the BA profession in the ECBA blueprint, but we have like a more of an introductory section. So all these different drill areas that you can pick to concentrate one chapter at a time. So they're really aligned with the chapters in the BABOK. And so we promote them as being great ways to practice what you've read. So let's say you read a knowledge area at a time. Maybe you supplement it with other materials like our book or other people's books. And then you take some practice questions from that area. Take a look at where you're scoring. And if you're not scoring very well, you want to go back and read sections where you thought that you had trouble. Our questions give you feedback, not only with the correct and incorrect answers, but the BABOK reference numbers, where to zero in to further do reading. So we really have gotten good feedback from that. People value that a lot. And then thirdly, we have simulations. So when you're ready to take a practice mock exam, you have an unlimited ability to take practice questions, so that for ECBA, you'd have a 50-question exam, much like you would take for real. So then you could see the flow, the pace. We look at the percentages from the IIBA blueprint, put that right into the exam, so that when you do a simulation, you're going to get the same percentages as you do in the real thing. And then we hold off on giving you feedback, so you can really test yourself without getting instant feedback. We give you instant feedback on the drills if you want it, but for the simulations, we want to prepare you for the real thing, so you don't have that until you get to the end. But then you can review all your questions and then look at them question by question to get the feedback when you're all done. So that is sort of a quick overview. So thank you for asking about that. We have found that to be pretty successful. So, okay, what other questions do you have? I know people are in different places. In fact, I'm going to put down here one last poll, which, as long as we still have a good quorum of people on the call right now, if you're still with us, can you fill this in to tell us how you are doing in terms of the level of your studying? Are you looking into it, in process of applying, blah, 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 studying hard? My exam is soon. So where are you at in terms of your own studying? We're getting a few more votes coming in. It looks like about half of you are applying right now. So for those of you that are applying, I'm going to close the poll and share it. So for those of you that are applying, what your best action is to get a hold of our application worksheet and start working on and apply for the exam from IIBA. You want to do that because if you do a bunch of studying and then apply, it could take you some weeks after that in order to get the application approved. And you hate to have that good study time kind of go to waste, because like anything else, if you don't use what you've studied, you're going to lose it. So you want to try to pace your really last gasp of studying right before your exam. So get that application in either before or during your early stages of studying. 30% are studying hard and 20%, so another 50% are studying hard or your exam is coming up soon. So I'd urge you to, if your exam is coming up soon, make sure you do practice questions. Get yourself in that frame of mind of answering questions. Move out of the study mode and into the mode of thinking like an exam creator and get practicing answering those tough questions. And of course, again, if I can be so bold as to tout our study exam, there are great ways to help you do that. And if you're still studying hard, like 30% of you are, then I would say you need a lot of hours to spend absorbing the BABOK, plan out, a certain number of hours a week, keep going, make it steady, make a commitment to it. I think studying for a certification exam is a fabulous journey. Every one I've done, it's been a learning experience for me. I've grown from it. I feel proud of the accomplishment. And when you see people post on LinkedIn that they've gotten their CBAP or whatever certification, it's a great thing to see. And so you can share that news with your colleagues, and I encourage you to do that. Social media is a great way to it's not, I don't view it as bragging at all. I think people are so relieved and happy to get that. It's well worth sharing. So I think it's a fabulous experience. I'm really glad that you guys are going down that journey, and hope you stick with it. I know not everybody gets to the end, but I'm here as a cheerleader to help encourage you, because I think there's a lot of value to you personally and to your companies and to the profession for engaging in certification. So for CBAP, we're almost at 10,000 CBAPs in the world. That would be a great milestone to hit in 2018, wouldn't it? I think that'd be fabulous. So thanks, Tina. Be in touch, and everybody else too. If you don't have any more questions, I am going to sign off. If you have any last minute questions, shoot them in now. Otherwise, I'm going to close down the chat. And remember, we're going to do follow-up with you with discount offerings on our products, as well as pointer to where the recording's at. Make sure you download the slides if you'd like a copy of them, and then check out our website for additional resources. So thank you, everybody, for attending. I'm going to sign off for now. Thank you, Laura, for that. I'm glad it's been helpful. And come back next month if you're still studying. We'll have another chat session, and best wishes in getting your exam done and passed. Thank you now. Bye-bye.